All right. What is up, Tomboy Official? It has been a little bit. Um, so today I wanted to talk about this topic of coming out, but not really in the way that most people talk about it. A lot of people talk about like how to come out to this person or that person or your family or your friends or whatever. Overall, I mean, coming out overall just naturally is a lifelong thing. Like, unless you live and work and only interact with other queer people to a point where it doesn't even come up, or where people just kind of like everyone kind of assumes that maybe you're queer because you're in a certain space. Unless your life is kind of like that and stays like that and has always been like that and will always be like that, and even if you are in queer spaces, you're still coming out to people sometimes too, because people want to know your pronouns, how you identify, all kinds of stuff. Like, eventually that kind of comes up. Um, but one thing I've noticed is this kind of idea, and I've talked about this before. It's not a new topic. It's not a new idea that I'm kind of like discussing all of a sudden. Like, I've talked about this before, and it's just my own opinion. I think other people have this opinion too, but I think most people seem to have the other opinion of, coming out to people because they want to actively, like, I'm not knocking it. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. If you want to do it, do it. But for people who don't want to do it, I don't think they should feel pressured to do it. Like, as far as coming out to people, like, I've never felt like I need to come out to people. I mean, first of all, I'm not like super femme presenting or anything, and that already is enough of a tip, in my opinion. It's not a 100% thing, but it's enough of a tip to a point where I'm like, well, I don't really, um, yeah, it's enough of a tip to a point where, you know, I don't think people are really, um, like, I don't know, like, I don't think people don't know. Um, but I also feel like if I don't have the type of relationship, for myself anyways, if I don't have the type of relationship with a person where I'm even talking to them about my dating life or what I do when I go out or the types of friends I have or anything like that, like, if we don't even have that kind of relationship, why would I need to even like come out to the person? I don't care if they're family or friends or what, but it's like, if we never talk about those topics, why should I even bring it up? Like, you know, and I've definitely got a lot of people in my life that are kind of like, we know each other because we've spent time in the same space, usually churches and things. We've spent time around each other. We've spent time in the same space. We spent time in the same environment together. And some reason, um, you know, those people just don't know, or they're not clear about it or something. Or they just make assumptions when they talk, and I just let people make assumptions about things because I'm like, I don't really care. Like, I don't need to correct you. Like, I never said that. That's something you're assuming. Like, whatever it may be. I can talk about some examples, but I don't know. For myself, I've never really felt the need to be like, I need to sit people down and be like, I need to tell you this thing that I've been like hanging on to, and like scared that, like, you know there might be rejection around the corner and all, which there is, that's definitely looming. But I feel like people don't need to know if it's not part of what we discuss. I know I've talked about this before. I know a lot of people through a church lens, and I was socialized in a church, and like a very strict kind of church, and definitely not a lot of supportive LGBT kind of people. Now that it wasn't. I mean, yes, there were prejudiced people, but I would say compared to how a lot of churches are, my experiences were like what I saw as far as discrimination and stuff, and what I heard about and what I witnessed was like, people would say, okay, oh, that person's gay, or like, so there would be like a bit of like outing. Like, the way I found out not most people were gay in the church. The way I found out about the gay people who were in the church, or associated with the church, or went to different churches but the same denomination and were interacting with other people, the way I found out, only one person I knew, I think, directly came out to me. One other person I knew told me about their uncle, who I knew their uncle, and then because I think they were like, I don't remember if they were part of the church or just like affiliated, but I knew the uncle. And otherwise, yeah, it was just people telling me about other people who they found out were gay. Most people weren't running around like telling everybody. Like, they'd maybe tell somebody, and then, or their really close knit group of friends knew, and then like people would spread the news, around, once they found out. So, I think I had only really had one friend that came out to me, um, that was through the church. But there were people I knew, that were gay, but most of the time I knew they were gay because somebody else was like, oh, I found out that this person's gay because they told me, and then they'd come tell me. And so I knew of a gay guy who was like one of my besties, close neighbor friends in high school. And then, he was part of a different church, but the same kind of denomination of church. And all these churches were kind of connected throughout LA and stuff. Throughout LA, Inland Empire, like Orange County, San Diego, like a lot of the Adventist churches are kind of connected, school wise, college, and that kind of stuff. Like, there is like a big social network of people, even if you don't really talk to them. Like, if you were socialized in the church and you grew up like that, they're gonna be people that you knew that know other people. Like, I know people who know people that I've known, and I know of them, and I may have never met them, and then later, like, down the line, I sometimes meet some people through, like, maybe another friend, and then it's like we find out that we have friends in common and stuff, and it's like really weird. But it's not like a problem. It's just that's just kind of how it is. It's a big network of people, and they are very interactive and social. At least during my upbringing, they were. That the churches were all pretty interactive with each other. So, it wasn't uncommon to come across people who were gay, or who I knew were gay. And I mean, the reason I say that, I don't know if it was like a terrible um a terrible experience or something, a terrible, um like, I've never heard of any of those people that I knew that were either friends or friends of friends who I learned were gay. I've never heard of any of them experiencing like a firsthand, um like, somebody telling me, oh, I got kicked out of this religious school because of being gay, or I got, you know like, they're like, of course you're gonna hear the messages. You'll be around people who kind of are prejudiced. Not everybody, though. um and a lot of it was never like to the face. It was always like behind someone's back, or like there'd be like a debate about like biblical texts and things like that. So like, you're around it, and you definitely would catch the idea that, like, you know they don't want you to be gay. They don't want that at all. But I only remember one sermon in my whole life where the pastor was kind of talking about some anti-homosexual kind of thing. And after that sermon, the one of the ladies who was part of the religious school, because this happened at church, but people from the religious school that like taught or like worked in the office and stuff, there were adults there, kids from the church and stuff too, or kids from the school and stuff too. One of the ladies that worked at the school kind of chewed out the pastor and didn't wait. Like, I guess this happened in the lobby right after church, because like at this church, like when the service is over, the pastor goes to like the back of the church to like shake people's hands like as they're coming out, like leaving out the door. And so after that sermon, I guess on her way out, while there were still people probably in the lobby, or people who had already left, or people who were waiting to like leave the actual sanctuary area, she just like went in on him and was just like, you can't be talking like that about like LGBT people, and like my son is gay, and like, like she was kind of like, you're gonna have some problems if you keep preaching that message. And I've never heard it at that congregation since. I don't listen to their services anymore at all, but I grew up in that church, and I went so often that it's like, I would have heard it. Yeah, I would have heard it if it did come up again. But yeah, I had only heard that one sermon from that specific church. That was the only sermon I'd ever heard in the church I grew up in. And I don't even remember it. I don't remember it. But I do remember us having like a lot of debates or like conversations. And you could tell like when you talk to people, there were a lot of people that believed that the Bible was kind of like against things. But they never really talked much about all the other stuff that the Bible says that people are against or whatever. They kind of would just focus in on like this one sentence in Leviticus and all this, and it's just like, it was really weird. But also, is like, it was just, I already would always see that it was so uneven. It's like, well, you want to focus on that, but it's like, what about all these other things that the Bible teaches about doing or not doing? And then nobody wants to focus on those, even if it's talked about like so many other times. Like they want to just focus in on the most like controversial issues. So I definitely grew up with the idea and, hearing people, because, I was never like actively just being like running around like, oh, I'm gay, but, I did hear people, I overheard people say things when they think, it's almost like if you're like, say if you're Asian, but people don't know much about Asians, and like maybe you're Asian and you're around a group of people that doesn't know much about Asians, and say you're Chinese and people don't know you're Chinese, they just think you're Japanese or Korean or something. I don't know. Let's just say this is the example. And so maybe you have a lot of friends, that maybe don't know that you're Chinese, and they start just like talking crap about Chinese people and joking around and telling like racist jokes because they don't know. And then they find out, and then they never say that around you again, or something like that. They find out you're Chinese, and then you only hear them then making jokes about like Japanese people or Korean people or Filipino people, but you know that you've heard them make jokes about Chinese people, about who you are. Like, it was kind of like that. It's like, yeah, you like overhear stuff, but they're saying it because they don't think they're like offending you. And so that's why they would kind of say it. They would never really confront people to their face and be like, oh, I know you're gay, and like, let me like put you down about it. I'd never really seen or heard that. It was always just kind of like, the Bible teaches this and we need to like talk about it, kind of. But also, it's like nobody was really following the Bible too well anyway. So it was one of those things that is like, it's very contradictory, because like people always expect, I've noticed with like, because things with sexuality, even if it's not like, even with heterosexual sexuality, it's still very taboo in American culture in general. You know, I don't know if it's still like this, but I remember when I was in school, you have to get permission from your parents to go to like the sex ed classes where they talk about it, or it would be the opposite, where if your parents don't want you to go, they would like send in a note or whatever. Um, and They would kind of do that, and so, but I don't know if they, I don't know. In high school, I don't remember them like telling anybody else, but I um I think, yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I get why people come out. Like, if it's like a burden to them, of course they're gonna want to, talk about it um, to people that are around them. But I don't really see a need to talk about it. Like, I don't like hide things necessarily. I just live my life, and it's like, well, if you never ask me about where I go, you're probably not gonna know where I'm going, And I don't really post stuff on social media much either. I mean, I do podcast episodes, plenty of them, but, you know, I don't really post stuff on social media like that too much. Like, on occasion, like at a pride event, I'll probably end up on someone else's social media photos, but I don't really, you know, go around like telling people things. Like, if that's not what we're talking about, like if we don't talk about it, I just don't talk about it with them. Um, like most of the people who I have come out to has been just like them organically asking me if I'm dating anybody, or like what kind of people I like to date, or like how was the last person I dated or whatever, and then I'll tell them, and that's how they find out. It's usually not like, let me sit you down and tell you about this. It's usually like, if it happens organically, I'll just answer the question, but I'm usually not, or if they're in a group where I'm talking, I'm usually not, just like, let me sit you down and tell you all this. It's like, I don't really feel the need to do that, because I don't do it with any other thing. Like, I don't just come to people and just be like, hey, you know um like, hey, like, I need to talk to you, and then let's go to coffee, and we can sit down, and I'm gonna like tell you that, you know did you know I majored in psychology? It's like, I don't need to tell people that. Like, I don't really feel a need to tell people, but I do understand that other people do have that need, or it helps them, so I'm not gonna knock it. I'm not gonna say don't do it, or that it's wrong, or that it's bad. um but lately, I know we've been talking about dating, um and I'd say it definitely comes up in dating. I mean, like, especially if it's from an app. Like, from an app, it just, well, let me just say something interesting. Uh, just something that happened like this weekend. I was at I was out with some LGBT friends. Well, not out. I was like with them, at a party, and you know, there were people there that I knew, and there were a lot of people there that I didn't know. But the people that I didn't know all kind of were either friends, or dating some of the other people there that I had met before, or that I knew already. Um, and somebody, um, who I have met before and talked to, kind of referred to me as, like, they were talking about like something that I had said, and like they said, they were like, oh yeah, they said, like, whatever it was that I had said, they were like telling it to somebody else, which was fine. It wasn't like a big deal. It was like, say I said that I took the train or whatever, and then they were saying like, oh, they said that they took the train, and I'm just thinking like, that's kind of interesting that they chose to use that pronoun, because I've never, use that pronoun, but it's like I can kind of tell where it's coming from because it's like, well, me and this person never sit down and talk about like pronouns and things like that, and so they probably don't know, and so just to keep it on the safe side, they use they because it is more neutral. You're not saying he, you're not saying she, you're saying they, and I kind of caught on in my mind. I'm like, oh, they don't know, um, how I refer to myself as far as pronouns, and I don't write it in my emails or put it on my Instagram or put it on anything. Like, I don't usually put it on things. Like, if you don't, like I said, if you don't talk to me about it, and I'd say the only place that is obvious is like if you go on my Instagram and you see all the stuff that I follow. It's like, well, if they're not people I know, it's just a bunch of queer content mostly. It's either dance related stuff or queer related stuff. Um, I almost only follow like queer stuff for the most part, or like snowboarding, but yeah, I don't really follow that much other variety. So I'm like, that's a simple way, if you want to see anything, just see what I follow on Instagram. But I don't know if it's private or not. I have no idea. Um, but yeah, like if I hear somebody say, they across the room. Now, if they said he, I'd be like, okay, like I don't refer to myself as he, and I would probably like, I wouldn't like interject or like make it awkward, but I'd be like, I'd find a way to kind of make it maybe, because I don't know if I want people referring to me as he. Um, I mean, I already get misgendered plenty and referred to as he, and I usually just don't even say anything. Um, it mostly once I start talking, people realize, oh, you're not a man. Um, but I usually don't have to say anything. But other than like when I talk, then they know, and so it's like okay. And I usually don't have to like say like, oh, I'm a woman. I have before though. I've said that to people, but it's not like a big deal. Like I just usually just let it go. But I mean, I wouldn't want someone to like think I'm a guy and then be trying to like have a relationship with me of any kind, assuming that I'm a man or that I identify as he or him, you know, because I don't. I mean, I don't identify as they either, but I mean, if people call me they, I don't really mind. It doesn't bother me at all, actually. I don't really care at all. Like, it's fine to me. Like, um, because I kind of get it. I'm like, okay, like, and I don't identify that way, but it's not, I would say I would embrace it, but I just wouldn't probably put it written anywhere, or I wouldn't like introduce myself that way. If somebody asked me like, what are your pronouns, I wouldn't say like she, they, or like they, them, or anything like that. I'd just say she, her. But if people call me them, or they, or whatever, I don't really mind. Um, because to me, when people say that, it's kind of more like they kind of see that there's kind of some gender like differences and they kind of like notice it, which is why they're saying they instead of she specifically or he specifically. They kind of see like something more than just like she, her. And I'm like, so I appreciate it when people say they, but I wouldn't want to like erase the she, her part of things. But I also am not he. I'm not a him. I don't think I'm a him. It's not really. I mean, if people are, they are, but I'm not. And that's fine too. But I also, that's just how I see things, and things change. I mean, who knows? But you know, that's just kind of how I feel about it right now. Um, but yeah, when it comes to like dating and stuff, and I've talked about this before too. Like when it comes to dating and trying to, um, go out on dates and meet people. The apps these days, I don't know how straight apps are, but the queer apps usually have, other than the pictures, they have a lot of categories for you to kind of describe a lot of stuff about yourself, even with like pull down menus of like how you are, like what are your pronouns, what's your, sexual orientation, if that's, what's your sexuality, kind of what do you identify as, like what are you looking for. And then there's all these other kind of categories, like if you smoke or smoke or have weed products or alcohol or religious or political affiliations or just different kind of hobby related stuff. Um, and so if you're looking at someone's profile, you can kind of easily identify just looking at all the terminology that they put in certain areas. You're like, okay, they click that they are poly, they click that they go by, they them, they click that they're, in a couple relationship, and they're looking, and they're non, of course if they're poly, they're non-monogamous, and you know they might put, like, I'm looking for, a casual girlfriend with, like, for myself, but me and my partner are together in a non-married couple arrangement or something. I'm just making this up, but like you'll see something like that, or something that says like something along those lines, or like, and kind of how they identify everything and what they're looking for. So usually that part's kind of clear, but sometimes you might want more clarity. I don't know if I've ever seen profiles where people don't put any of that information. But oh yeah, it also has age and things like that. But yeah, like I've never seen anyone, you know, I don't know. Like I'd say the most coming out that I do is probably when it comes to dating, because it's like that's usually when you're talking more about kind of like what you're attracted to and what you're not attracted to, and kind of like deal breakers versus kind of neutral areas, and kind of like your own identity, kind of more like more specific details about it, probably. um like I remember I went on a date with a trans guy once, and I think um I don't remember what the term. Oh, I put fluid. I had fluid on my profile, and then he was asking me like, are you? Is it like sexuality fluid or like gender fluid? And I was like, or like they were asking me kind of like what I meant by that, because it was just like a button you can click. It wasn't like a whole like sentence that I wrote. It was just one of the multiple categories that I put, because I was like, well, that I guess explains things at the time. And I was basically just trying to say like I don't really care too much about like a person's gender of what they are. I mean, I'd say honestly I do care for my as far as my stress levels are concerned. That's mostly where it affects me, is where I'm like, I get a little socially stressed. Um, Sometimes if I'm, depending, with trans people, some trans people, not all of them, um, but some people, and then, not because of them, but it's because of society and just kind of like being out in public and stuff. I get anxious about that, because I've had some experiences that weren't so great, just from being in association, you know, um, and I know how crazy people can get out there, so it's just not always comfortable. Now, if I'm in like a queer space, I usually don't think about it at all, but it's like, even if we just go over to a McDonald's or go over to like some other like straight space, then it's like, I get a little like, you can kind of tell. I don't know. I don't want to talk about that too much, but I've talked about it before on here. But I feel like I'll get way off topic if I go that direction. But yeah, that's probably the most that I would say is like, as far as my own coming out process, is it's usually going to be happening while dating. because they're the only people that I think really needs to know. Like, what does it matter to anybody else? But you know, and I've probably lied about it before though. If people have asked me if I was gay, I've I'm pretty because I can think of a couple times where people just like asked me out of the blue, and I was just like not trying to talk about that. Especially because they were asking me about like a specific person that I was like I already knew that like I wasn't supposed to be talking about her because she didn't want me to, and so I was like, let me just not like talk about this. Um, or I used to say that I was straight, but I just like to do things with women only, and then, or I remember there was a guy who I was with a gay guy somewhere, like at a boba shop or something, and he was kind of like, oh, look at those pants, like I know you're like a lesbian or whatever, and he was just kind of like, just kidding, like and like I didn't respond, but like he that's why I said just kidding after a while, but it was like just the way he said it was like I was just like, why are you even like mentioning this? Like we weren't even talking about that, but he was just kind of calling it out, and I was just kind of like I just left it alone. I was like, oh my goodness, but and I don't know if I was with. I think I was only with. I don't know if it was just me and him or me and him and one other person, but um, I just don't remember. But um, yeah, like when it comes up in dating, I mean, it kind of has to come up. I don't think I don't know if straight people talk about this stuff though. I I'm wondering. You know, I've always not always wondered, but like I've been curious to know like if straight people talk about their preferences for things, not just like in the bedroom, but like as far as like different aspects of femininity, masculinity, different comfort levels with different like hobbies or clothing or interests and things like that. Um, and just kind of like trying to get a picture of like this person's comfort level. Cause that was the thing that I guess I didn't really mesh with. I mean, it's not like I've dated that many cis men, but the ones that I did date, I feel like it was more like assumed that like I'm gonna be a certain way, and there was a lot of like assuming and not a lot of talking. There was a lot of assuming, like there was a lot of assuming that I would prefer them to drive, so whenever we would go somewhere, they would drive. Or there was a lot of assuming that they were gonna pay for stuff, and so we'd go to a movie, he'd pay for a ticket, or we'd go out to dinner, he'd pay for the meal, you know, and these guys would just be paying for stuff, but it was like I never asked. I have my own money. I have my own car. I can drive myself. Like, but or I can drive. I think there was only one time where a guy asked me if I could drive because they had I guess they had something going on. I'm not gonna get into details of it, but like basically their car was not available. Um, and yeah, just like all kinds of stuff. Even if it was like, if say if we were camping, for example, they would assume that like they're doing all the like manual labor and all the like they would just start taking on roles of stuff. But I would also notice there's like this other discomfort where they were like they didn't want to do certain other stuff because it was like the female role or whatever. So it was kind of like I didn't really like that. I was just kind of like I don't really like that. Or guys who are like, oh, I'll change your tire, or I'll like jump start your car, and like I'll do it, like, and they kind of like not push me out of the way, but like assume I don't know what I'm doing, and then I had a guy who kind of like laughed in my face once, because he was like, kind of like, oh, you silly woman, you don't know how to jump this jump this battery. Like it was I knew how, but like this specific car had like it was confusing because it had a black um a, a black cap on one side, but the plus sign, it had a plus sign that was red, and then a red cap on the other side. Like usually I've seen like Um, yeah, usually I've seen him, like, so I was like, is this the positive or is it negative? Because usually I'm used to red being only on one side. And so I was kind of like, well, why did they put it as red? I was kind of like, I was like, which side is it? Because you have to put the clamps on the right one, like the positive or the negative, and it was just kind of confusing. I didn't think to look it up on my phone, but and maybe yeah, I didn't think to look it up on my phone. Now I probably would have done that, but yeah, I was like outside of like a liquor store or gas station, and it's my brother's car, and he calls me over to jump his car, and I'm like, yeah, I'll jump it. And then I think he needed to leave, so I let him take my car back home because he was just down the street, and then he's like, I really gotta go or something, like, can I just take your car home? And and so after I was jumping his car using someone else's car, I guess. I don't remember how this was going. I honestly don't remember this, because I think my brother wasn't there by the time I got there. But I get there, my brother's, I'm gonna, because he didn't know how to jump start the car, so he's asking me, and like it was like literally like two lights down from the house. So I was like, yeah, I'll come in, like what I'm not gonna leave my brother stranded, especially if it's like 2 blocks away. Like I'll just drive over, because I was home when he called me, and so I come over to help him out, and then I think my brother takes my car, and I think we had like a quick charge or something. I don't know what it was. There was a reason why we didn't need um, my car. Either we were using another person's car to jump it, or um, either way, we have these like clamps. Um, and no, I think there was another car there. I don't remember, but anyways, this guy comes out of the liquor store or gas station or wherever it was, and he's like, "Give me that!" Like, kind of like, "Oh, you like," kind of like, people kind of start trying to talk crap, like, "Oh, like." Trying to make themselves look better and like, oh, you don't know how to do this. And he literally put them on the wrong. He put the clamps on the wrong, like the opposite charges, and then starts the car, and then the cables start like melting. I'm like, and then like he turns it off, and he has to take like some kind of cloth or like a shirt or something, and like, because they're hot, and so he has to take them off the battery, and he's just like, kind of like, haha, like sheepishly, like, I don't know, like, I hope you guys figure it out. And he kind of like quickly like left, and I was like, yeah, he didn't know how to do it either, but he was kind of just like trying to like puff himself up, and then like, so I was like, well, now I know which one is the right one. And then I guess there was some other guy there who was just like, oh yeah, it's supposed to go on the other side. What was that guy doing? And then he was just like, yeah, it's fine. You can do it. Like, just wait till they like cool off or whatever. And like, but I was just like, who is this guy? But there's stuff like that where it's like, if you're female, guys sometimes kind of act that way. Um, like, not all of them, but just that kind of guy, that specific guy was like that, and there are other guys that are like that. But I don't know. I just found it to be kind of like, I guess I was mostly just like annoyed, because I was like just annoyed with the situation. But that's kind of how it was, like, going out with the couple cis men that I have gone out with. I just didn't really like that they assumed so much, and that they were just so uncomfortable with like a variety of, like, having like a variety of like shared kind of roles. Like, they just couldn't do it. It's like, and to me it was like, I get it, because when you have like gender roles and certain stuff, you might be insecure to kind of step into something that you don't really find, you know, as part of your nature. Um, like, for me, I don't really like wearing dresses, like, at all. I hate wearing them, actually. If I can, I'll avoid situations where I have to wear a dress. There's a wedding in Africa that I wanted to go to last summer, and part of the reason why I didn't want to go is because I was like, well, it's going to be multiple days, and I'm going to have all these dresses. and I didn't want to have any dresses. And so I just was like, that's another deal breaker. You know, I don't want to spend 1, 2, or 3 days wearing dresses, you know, because culturally I probably would have had to be doing that, and I didn't want to. And then also have to spend all this money to go over there. I was like, just the fact that I have to wear dresses makes it so I don't want to go at all, you know? Like, even though I really wanted to go, but I mean, if it wasn't for that, I probably would have tried a whole lot harder to go. Um, but I don't really see myself wanting to go to some stuff, you know, just because people are so like inflexible with things. I'm like, well, if they can't be flexible, then I can't be flexible either. Sorry, you know. But yeah, I've kind of seen some situations with some guys like that where they're like, you know, I kind of like, if it's from like the dresses perspective, I kind of get that. So it's like, you know, I could kind of get why guys might not want to do certain stuff. It might feel to them like they're wearing a dress or like doing something like that. But it's like, if it's not something that other people are going to notice, you know, and I'm not going to complain if you ask me to pick up the bill, or if I can pay sometimes, or like if you need me to drive, or like, you know, or if you prefer me to drive or whatever. Like, I'm not going to be like, you're the man, you need to do it. Like, I don't really care, you know. I wouldn't care if a guy was like, oh, we need to change the tire, you know, and I was the one doing changing the tire, like, or jumping the battery or whatever. Like, I wouldn't really care. That doesn't bother me. You know, I actually like doing that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you have like a boyfriend and you're a female, usually your boyfriend is not going to be interested in you doing those things a lot of the time. And I don't know if it's like an insecurity, or they don't want people to judge them, or they feel like they're not being like polite to you. But I'm very capable. There aren't that many things that I feel like I need men to do for me. Um, that's something that I, you know, need that I can't do for myself because I'm not a man. I mean, I don't really have things in my life that are necessarily like that, I don't think. I don't really think that way, but I think those are the types of stuff when I think about coming out and things, that's kind of more what it looks like for me, is more like trying to explain to people all these little nuanced little personality quirk things, you know, that are just like, this is just me, this is just how I am, you know, but just looking at me, there's some stuff you may not know. Um, and so that's kind of how I've seen it, but I don't really know. Like, um, I don't think with dating, I don't like with dating. I don't think you can really not like be in a relationship. I don't really think you can be in a relationship and not have these kind of conversations if you're a queer person. Really, I mean, maybe if you're just like, you know, I don't know. Mm, like, I don't know, because I've had a straight person tell me that their gay guy friends aren't that way, and I'm kind of like, but I don't know. I haven't really dated like gay guys. I don't think, um, you know, just like trans guys that are like maybe bi or queer, or poly or pan, but never cis straight guys, and never cis straight guys, and um, never gay guy. I don't think, never cis gay man either. I don't think. Those are probably the two types of guys I've never really. I mean, I don't know why I would date like a cis gay guy. Like, I don't know how that would work. Because is he gay if he's dating like a female? I don't know how that works. But, um, I mean, unless it was just like the identity, like terminology as far as like identity, but they just kind of are more open to like dating females. Maybe that could be a maybe, but I don't really know a lot of guys where that's definitely what is gonna happen. But yeah, I mean, it's just kind of my opinion. I don't really, it's kind of just an alternative opinion, I guess, because you rarely hear people saying, um, anything outside of, you need to come out, just wait till you're ready. There seems to be all this pressure on LGBT people to be trying to come out, and it's like, I mean, if you want to come out, that's fine, but if you don't want to come out, I don't think you're necessarily staying in the closet just because you're not like sitting people down one at a time, every person you know, like, hey, I have something I need to share with you. It's like, you know, like, for me, my main rule is if we don't hang out, like, if we don't actively make plans together and go out and do stuff together, and I'm not talking like a work party, like where it's like scheduled by the job, or like, some kind of function, that's part of like something that I'm already like involved with somebody. I mean, like, hanging out with them, like, I've got your number, you've got my number, we actually text each other, we actually talk online a little bit, like, we might have one or two social media accounts, and every now and then we send each other like a message or something, and then we make plans and we hang out and we meet up maybe once a year, or maybe way more than that, whatever. Usually those are the people that are gonna know a lot. The people that we never hang out or go anywhere or do anything, or people who are so like limited on the conversations that they're open to having, because I do know a lot of people that are very, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with asexuality. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. If someone's asexual, they're asexual. There's nothing wrong with that. But I feel like I was raised around a lot of people who, I wouldn't say they were sex negative, but they were very sex, like, either don't talk about it if you are doing it and you're not married and straight, or don't do it if you're not married and straight. um, it was mostly, those were the ideas that the people I was around were kind of like functioning under, and so it was more like, don't talk about it, don't, like, so when I would go out with friends, like, it was very rare, you know that people would talk a lot about dating and like who they would date and stuff like that, even though a lot of times people were assumed to be like cis straight people, you know they were never talking about it. Like, cis straight people were never, they weren't always even talking about it. And especially because there was always mixed company. We always hung out with like males and females a lot of times. Our friend group was mostly males and females. I'm gonna guess the guys were usually talking about it with each other. Because I had a lot of guy friends, and I noticed whenever I would hang out with them, it would kind of come up on occasion. You know, certain stuff about like girls or whatever, like just like high school, say. Um, but there wasn't really a whole lot of depth to the conversations. Like, people were really still hiding it, um, and everyone almost like acted as if they were asexual, like that they didn't have any sexual interests. Almost like that's kind of what you like. If you hung out with these people like on a very regular basis, you would probably assume that like people just didn't have sex drives or didn't have any interest in sexual things. Like, it almost just never came up unless somebody was kind of like, "Ooh, we're gonna have some like naughty conversation," and then it kind of felt like, "Oh, like we shouldn't be talking about this." Almost like when you sneak a beer, or like smoke a cigarette, or like sneak a joint or something like that. And like, at that age you're not supposed to be doing that. It was almost like that. It was kind of in the same category of like, okay, we're kind of trying to get away with something by having this conversation. Like, we kind of knew that, like, um I mean, maybe talking about an attraction was okay, but there were certain categories of attractions that were seen as more okay than others. And then if you were actually like hooking up with somebody, uh, you probably weren't talking to more than like two or three people, and there really wasn't a whole lot of kissing and telling kind of thing. But people were super gossipy, so people would always find out because people had big mouths. Um, and I think maybe because I complain a lot about this like religious environment with like gossip, and maybe that's where it comes from, is when people are so repressed to not talk about certain things. And I've never thought about that till now, because I was like, why is it such a problem in those communities? And when people are so repressed to not talk about things, I think it just kind of spills out. It's kind of like when you shake a kombucha or something in a glass bottle, and then you go unscrew the top, and it just like freaking fizzes all over the place. Like sodas do that too, but they're not as bad as kombucha. Like kombucha is like it's super fizzy. Um, but that's kind of how I would see it. It's like people just they want to share or get it out, even if it's not their business. They're just like so happy to know about a topic that's so taboo and have something to say, but it's not them that they're talking about. They're not talking about themselves and their own lives. They're talking about someone else's life. Um, but maybe that's why they do it. I don't really know, because it's just it. Most of the times when I found out a bunch of things, it was usually because, like, I didn't want to listen to other people, but it was like that's how the conversations would be. You'd be just like chilling at the beach, like sitting in a car with somebody after like a late night beach vespers or whatever, and there's church the next morning, but you're younger, so you're not gonna go right home. You can't go to a movie because of the religion. You can't go to the mall because it's probably closed. You can't go out to eat because you're not supposed to spend money on anything on the Sabbath. And so you can't really do anything but like drive around or sit around in a car, or like go places where they don't make you pay, like a bookstore maybe. You could maybe do that on a Sabbath, but just not buy anything and just sit around like a Starbucks or something like that, but not buy anything. And just sit around and talk. Um, so we would do that a lot and just sit around and talk. A lot of times it was in the car, so we could go to a different location, and a lot of times it would be like sitting in the car at the beach or something, or sitting in the car at the house of whoever was getting taken home, and we just kind of all sit in the car, and just talk and talk for like hours and hours until one person's like either have to use the bathroom, or like I'm getting tired, I want to go home, or the driver's kind of like I want to go home, and then they finally drop everybody off. But it's like, yeah, I mostly grew up with like just the tight knit friend groups that just there's a lot of like secrecy conversations. It's like, okay, so I know this person was kind of like making out with that person, or this person has a crush on that person, but it's like, you know, nobody really like this wasn't something you would just like tell everybody. It was still secretive, even though it was like in mainstream, American culture, teenagers kissing or holding hands or asking someone out on a date and then they said yes. That kind of stuff isn't usually like too taboo, you know. But even in that environment, it kind of was. Even though people were doing it, it was like people didn't talk about it much. And I don't think it's the same thing as being asexual. Like it almost had that vibe. Like when you were talking to people, you could talk to some. I have friends that I've talked to for years, who like we never once talked about anything related to dating or going out on dates or relationships or anything. I've had female friends that like were just so uncomfortable talking about, like, it wasn't just with me, like they just wouldn't even be comfortable to talk about having a crush on a guy. A cis straight female just wouldn't be comfortable just like telling other cis straight female friends that she had a crush on a guy. Of course, because people were, gossipy, and I have witnessed people just learning who someone has a crush on and then literally going and telling that person, while the other person is there. I mean, that's wrong. I'm sorry to say it's wrong, but it is. But like if somebody says don't say anything. Like that's just messed up. But it's like they thought they were doing them a favor, and then they really like embarrass somebody, and it's like when this other friend was telling me what the other person did to them, I was like, dang, that sucks. But it's like it was like that. It was like people wouldn't even talk about like hardly like crushes or anything. It was just like so just like limited with like the conversations. Um and you always have like parents lurking around, like I would say we would talk out in front of our houses. My parents would always be like lurking around, or like we talk in the driveway or outside the house, and then I'd always see my dad kind of like lurking around in the driveway, and like of course it's probably because the windows were foggy and stuff and you're in a car till like midnight. But it's like we're not doing anything, we're just talking, like, and we don't want to come in the house because we don't want them to overhear what we're talking about because they're religious. And so we would just keep the conversations in the car. That was like the only place we could talk where it wasn't like, because even Starbucks or like back then Borders and stuff, it was still public. Like you're still in public. It was still a public space. But I don't know, man. It wasn't. Um, People weren't. Um, I guess people just weren't comfortable. They weren't really. It wasn't a very sex positive environment. Like people were even shamed for like the little things like that. Like I was saying, like the kissing, the crushes, that kind of stuff. Like the let's go out on a little date kind of thing. Like they weren't like, nobody was like going up in front of the congregation and being like, you're a sinner or whatever. But they were just like, amongst like social groups, just the way people kind of get involved in a way where it's like, it wasn't always like a positive thing. It was more just like a gossipy thing. And maybe out of jealousy, I don't know what it was. It was, who knows, I don't really know. It was kind of toxic on that end. It wasn't fully toxic all the time, but because a lot of cultures have taboos, but it's just, you know that's one thing that always liked about psychology, at least more modern psychology, is that it is more of like a positive approach to talking to people. And it kind of actually helped kind of working in the field, because I was like, oh, I got to get comfortable talking about all this stuff. And I got pretty comfortable talking, because I've always been comfortable talking to people, but it was more like, well, not always. That's not true. That's not true, because I'm pretty shy. I would say I have social anxiety, but it's like I'm also very social. So it's like I'm shy and I do have social anxiety, but I also socialize a lot. So it's kind of, and I like to. So it's kind of like, but it does stress me out. I'm almost always a little bit stressed out before I go do something. But usually it's okay. Like once I do it, or if I haven't met with someone in a while and just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna catch up with someone I haven't seen in like a year, I kind of play out things in my mind a lot, and I'm like, oh, like, you know, there's a lot of like overthinking about things, but it's always fine. Like I've almost never had interactions like where I've met with people and it's been like a bad time or whatever. It's like terrible. Like it's like usually it's like, okay, maybe I'm a little nervous, and then it's fun and we have a good time. And like, but I kind of anticipate like, oh, maybe I'm gonna be like, my brain's gonna be a little foggy, or I'm gonna be like nervous or not really know what to talk about, or like maybe I don't talk to that person too much. Or, if it's someone I don't really hang out with one on one too much, and then we go somewhere, just me and them, and it's kind of like, there have been some times where I've like avoided, like, I think I was also tired, but Sunday morning there were a couple people that I could have hit up in San Diego where I was like, I could probably hit them up and try to make plans, but I'm like, I haven't seen them for a while, and I was like, I'd kind of rather just sleep than try to grab lunch with somebody, because I was like, I don't want to be waking up earlier than I need to, and then be stressed kind of trying to talk to them. Um, so I kind of just left it alone, but um, yeah, like there was a little anxiety in it, but it wasn't that bad. it was more like I needed rest. If I would have been rested, I think I probably would have actually made the plans, regardless of if I had any anxiety about it or not. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like, we'll talk about anxiety related topics on another episode. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think about all the coming out stuff. I think it's interesting. To each their own. I'm not gonna knock it. If people want to come out, they should come out. If they don't really need to. If it's not safe for them, they probably shouldn't. Everybody's got a different situation and a different outlook. They shouldn't have to feel just because they're gay that they need to come out. It doesn't need to happen. And straight people don't need to come out. Why should you need to come out? You know, like if people know you, they're gonna know who you're dating. Like you don't have to like come out to them. I don't think it's like I don't know. That's just kind of how I see it. But if people don't know you, like why do you need to like sit them down and tell them who you're dating? It's like unless you just don't want them to like find out like that and you think it would be an issue, I kind of can understand like maybe it would feel more respectful for some people than to just like spring it on someone. But kind of like if you saw the L word when Shane and Carmen were dating. I think her name was Carmen, the Latina lady with the family that was really close, and then Shane got invited over to like I don't know if it was like a quinceañera or like a wedding or something where Shane was like they put Shane in a dress and then Shane's wearing like those like chucks and stuff and then yeah, like I just remember that. Um and then I guess Carmen got like frustrated, I guess cuz maybe her mom was trying to I don't remember the scene. I'd have to watch it again, but I think the mom was trying to like her mom was trying to set her up with like some man at the dinner table or something. She's like, I'm dating Shane, like I'm gay and this is Shane's my girlfriend. And then the mom kind of like is like, oh, I don't understand, and kind of like blows it off even though she kind of obviously knew. But then Carmen gets like kind of irritated by that and is kind of like, no, like I'm gay and I date women, and like, she kind of goes in more detail about it. And it's like I could see like culturally how some cultures like okay, that was a level too far. Maybe it was okay the way she just said it at first, but then when she kind of started making it kind of more of an issue and kind of being frustrated about it and making a scene kind of like at the family table, and Shane was kind of like, whoa, what are you doing, like just kind of calm down, like don't you don't want to say it to your mom like that, because she really liked Carmen's family and stuff, because the family was like embracing her. um but they were kind of like I interpreted it as the family knew, but they were just kind of like not talking about it, not open about it. I mean, very relatable. I feel like it's very relatable for my own life. It's like that's kind of how my family is. It's like nobody talks about anything. They're just kind of like quiet and leave it alone. But people know what's up. I mean, they're not blind. They just kind of don't have any conversations around it or any way to really discuss certain things. They just kind of leave it alone. But they know, but like they don't really like say anything one way or the other. They don't say, "Oh, go date people." They don't say, "Oh, don't go date people." They just kind of like leave it alone. But I don't know. I can understand too that not everybody sees it that way. That people want to kind of just do their own thing, and that's okay too. But I just feel like if people don't want to come out, it's not for everybody. I don't think that the whole message of like if you're queer you need to come out, that's not really true. I mean, I know sometimes people feel like they're lying to people and stuff like that. Like that can get tricky because, there's only so many times where you can let somebody assume something to where it's like, okay, now I'm like actually not being truthful because I'm not saying something and I'm letting them think something without, if they literally don't catch on or don't really understand or know. So I totally understand it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with coming out. I think there's just something wrong with like the pressure behind it, that it's not the same for an LGBT person, coming out, if you are going to come out, isn't going to be the same for every single person you meet. The person who's LGBT themselves, and then the other people that they know. You know, every situation, every person that you know as an LGBT person, you have a different relationship with that person. Like, I have friends that I talk about, you know, dating and all kinds of topics with, and I have friends that I've known for years that we've never once talked about anything related to dating or sexuality or anything like that. We just don't talk about those topics. We don't talk about alcohol. We don't talk about clubbing. We don't talk about bars. We don't talk about rated R movies. We don't talk about cannabis. We don't talk about politics. We don't talk about anything, you know, because they're not into any of that stuff. And I already know they're like ultra religious people. I know how they are. And I'm like, we can still hang out and socialize. Like, we don't need to be like talking about everything all the time. Um, but that's also kind of rare. Like, I know not everybody associates with those types of people. Usually they're very insular, but the people I know kind of aren't that insular. They're still sociable, but they just try to live a really strict life around their beliefs, and I respect that because I've done that before in my life, you know. But I respect it, you know. And I try not to get in anyone's way. Um, and I'm friends with a lot of like really religious people, and it's fine, you know. Like, we get along great, you know. Like, I think we get along great, but it's a very reserved, just very reserved friendships. Like, there's a lot of like taboos that you just don't really discuss, and I don't necessarily prefer that, but I get it, and I'm like, okay, like, if that's what they need to feel comfortable, because that's how they were raised. Like, I'm not gonna push them to like do things they don't want to do or talk about stuff they don't want to talk about. But if they tell me, like, hey, I'd like to maybe go to a pride event, or hey, I'd like to maybe go to, you know, like, go to a dispensary or something, it's like, yeah, come on, let's go do it, you know. Like, I'll be right there and I will help you buy your first thing or whatever it is, you know. Like, but I never push, I never suggest it. I only am there to help people who want to, you know, sample or experience different things that I'm already dabbling in over on my end. But I don't know, it's kind of funny. I really don't know how to even describe what I'm saying too well about like the type of reserved conversations. Like, they're very like rated G, not even hardly PG. Um, it's very like um, I don't know. I respect it, you know, because I don't really have, but maybe one friend who's religious that kind of pushes their ideas. I don't really have that many friends that are really religious that push their ideas. They kind of know that I do my own thing. They let me do my own thing. I let them do their own thing. You know, we still get along, but we just don't talk about like everything under the sun. It's a very limited. It's very limited as far as conversation. Um, but all right, guys. Well, if you get around to this episode, hopefully you liked it, and thanks for listening.